Welcome to Notable Approvals. I'm attorney Amanda Shaffer. I hope everybody watching had a happy holiday and safe holiday. Before we get to our case today, if you missed it last Wednesday, December 22nd, we did a Q&A discussion on staying safe for the holidays, options for domestic violence victims. You can rewatch the entire live in full on our Facebook page. Highly recommend that you do. There's some good information in there. And you can also check out, we have lots of resources for domestic violence victims if you are interested. And on that note, don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube so you don't miss any more of our lives. So today's case, I was very excited about last week. It was a waiver of inadmissibility case, and I'll explain that in a second, but these are not cases that are easy to get approved by any means. So whenever we have to work very hard to get them, and when we do, we get very excited about them. And this client in particular has been our client since I began as a lawyer. So it's been a long battle for him, and he's not completely done with it yet, but this is the most positive step in the right direction. So, since we first started his case, and things should just be easy from here on out. So this is a client who is a native and citizen of Mauritania. He first entered the U.S. back in, I think, 1997. He actually used his cousin's diplomatic passport from France. And he had some bad advice along the way. In 2005, there was something that you could have filed back then called the LULAC. LULAC stands for, I can't even tell you what it stands for anymore. Point is, there was a lot of fraud involved with LULAC. It was easy to get work permits, so a lot of people did it. A lot of times people went to attorneys looking to see what they can file for, and the attorneys just said, oh, you're eligible for LULAC when they weren't. Well, in this client's case, the attorney changed his date of birth and also lied about the time that he was last entered the country in order to get a work permit, and he didn't know until he saw the receipt notices, and she told him to lie at the interview, and he did get the work permit, and nothing more came of it, but it did come up at the marriage interview. Now, that wasn't the only fraud. Of course, there was the fraud of entering with his cousin's passport, and that was the main fraud that we were concerned about. So he met his now wife in 2008. And they got married in 2009, and in 2011, she filed a petition for him. That's when she started with us, or he started with us, and she filed the marriage petition, the I-130. That was approved, no problem. And he had told us at the time that he did not have proof of his entry, that he entered without inspection. So we said, okay, well, if you're an EWI, then we need a 601A waiver for entering without inspection, and you're gonna have to go abroad to do your visa interview and come back. Well, we go to the interview with him, and at the marriage interview, the officer says, how did you enter the country? And he answered, with my with my cousin's passport. And I was like, wait. That's not what we were told initially. So the problem is, when you file the 601A waiver, that's the waiver where for people who didn't enter the country legally, that they're going to eventually, once it's approved, have to leave the U.S. for a few weeks, have their interview at the consulate abroad, and then they can re-enter as a permanent resident. You can't file a 601A waiver if you need a waiver for any other reason. So it could be a criminal reason. It could be a fraud or misrepresentation reason. But if there's any other reason, that will automatically get denied, which it did in this case. And you actually have to file instead a 601 waiver. A 601 waiver isn't helpful if you don't have any proof of your entry, but at that point, immigration said, well, we do believe you entered the country lawfully with someone else's passport, therefore you're inadmissible based on fraud. So by the time this thing got denied, the actual adjustment and the 601A waiver, it wasn't until 2014. And our client would just tell us how afraid he was of having to be deported back to Mauritania. For those of you who don't know much about Mauritania, there still is slavery over there. It is not a place of religious freedom. it's a tough place to live, especially if you have dark skin, and like my client had. So we were like, well, why didn't you ever file for asylum? And he said he just didn't know about it. And by the time he went to lawyers, the LULAC thing, he was told, don't talk about what happened back home, because they were so scared of being sent back home. And he had the LULAC thing, the lawyer didn't tell him to do it. So we were like, look, if you're really afraid, if you file for asylum now, it's obviously you've been here for more than a year, you're not going to get asylum. But if your waiver doesn't get approved, then you have a backup for withholding of removal. And a reminder, withholding of removal is the same as asylum in the sense that you're afraid to return home because you were persecuted and or will be persecuted on account of one of the protected grounds like political opinion, sex, ethnicity, nationality, religion, particular social group. But there's a couple of main big differences between withholding of removal and asylum. The biggest of which is that with withholding of removal, you do not get a green card. You cannot get a green card that way. Asylum, a year after you have asylum, you can file for your green card and eventually citizenship. No citizenship withholding of removal either. So it was more of a backup option because although we felt good about his fraud waiver, they're just not easy to get approved. And they had a strong case, but it wasn't a case where there was no question, undoubted. And, those cases are few and far between anyway. So we filed for his asylum in 2016. That's still pending. In 2018, we refiled for his adjustment of status with the 601 waiver based on the fraud and misrepresentation. And we had to show that there is an extreme hardship to his U.S. citizen wife if she stays in the U.S. and he's returned to Mauritania, and if she leaves the U.S. with him and goes to Mauritania. So every case is different in how we show this. In this case, the U.S. citizen wife suffered from major depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. She had several traumas as a child. So she had been going to a psychiatrist. She had prescribed psychiatric medication. We put in all of that evidence. We wrote affidavits from our client and from his wife explaining how he was her entire support system in the U.S. With the thought of him leaving her goes above and beyond the type of emotional pain that the average person would suffer in that situation. She also suffered from some eating disorders and would have nightmares and flashbacks. I mean, there was a lot of really bad trauma in her past that the thought of losing her loved one again, in this sense, was bringing that all back, and she was being treated by it. And we had to also point out, look, she's not getting this treatment in Mauritania. It doesn't exist in Mauritania. And another important thing that we pointed out was, look, her family, I don't remember if it was her great-grandparents, I don't remember how far back it went, but her family was brought over here from Africa as slaves. And the thought of her having to go to a country that still allowed slavery to occur. And I don't remember the last time I looked at Mauritania Penal Code, but I know when I looked this case up in 2018, it was still legal or quasi-legal or something. So that thought alone was really scary for her. So we talked about all of that. We said, look, he even applied for asylum now that because he's that afraid as a backup, and we put in a copy of the asylum application. In addition, the family that she does have here, they're all in the U.S. None of them are over there. And she was starting to finally rebuild these relationships with her family, and she didn't want to have to lose that. She had student loans she wouldn't be able to pay back. She is actually a professional actress, and she's been a professional actress for years and years and years. And obviously you build up a reputation. She doesn't make millions of dollars. When I say professional actress, that is her main job. She is a nanny as well on the side, but that's basically what she does. And she does lots of theater that this will not translate abroad. The reputation won't translate. The theater industry won't translate. It just doesn't exist there. So she'd be giving up her livelihood and her passion as well. And then the last thing that we really pointed out was, look, she is a devout Christian. She goes to church every single Sunday. This is really important to her that she continues to practice her religion. Well, guess what? If she went to Mauritania, she wouldn't be allowed to practice her religion. There is no freedom of religion there. It is an Islamic country, and that would be a big problem for her. So I just shot off a lot of different factors, but essentially it's not one factor that got approved. That was the reason that we got it approved. It was all of the factors combined was the reason we got it approved, because everybody who comes to me who wants to do a waiver says, my spouse is really sad about me leaving. But that's not going to be enough. It's not just about being sad. It's about depression. It's about post-traumatic stress disorder. It's about an eating disorder. It's about not being able to continue to function in your normal life because of this fear. We highlighted all of that. Oh, and she also had 2 miscarriages. I forgot to add, because that is important because of how much that messes with your hormones, and how it was her husband who helped get her through that. So in her mind, she has to stay with him. She has to leave and go to Mauritania. And if she does, she's not going to have a career. She's not going to have a religion. She can possibly be put into slavery. So all these factors combined was what made the case strong and was the reason that it got approved. So a good lesson to take from this case is that if you have any doubt whether or not you have a good waiver case, talk to a lawyer. Go through all of these different factors. And when we do a consult for this type of thing, we start, does anybody have a health problem, physical health, mental health, learning disability, financial issue, where does the family live, any debts or loans, things like that. And you walk through it one by one. And then, of course, you have to look at that country where the immigrant's from, because it's 2 parts. And don't forget, it's 2 parts. One, that the person will suffer an extreme hardship if they stay here and you go. And 2, the person will suffer an extreme hardship if they go with you. So you have to show that back in their country, they're not going to get the same medical treatment or job or, lifestyle, whatever it is. So we're really excited about this case. We're waiting now for the adjustment of status application to be approved. Hopefully, fingers crossed, everything will go right, because the waiver is really the hard part here. The adjustment of status, he has no criminal history or anything like that. So we've gotten everything waived. That should hopefully be a breeze. And hopefully after all these years, our client will finally get a green card. And of course, I will update this notable approval in the event that happens, when it does. And yeah, that is all for today. If you have questions about filing a waiver of inadmissibility, our contact information has been scrolling across the screen this whole time. But don't hesitate. If you have any questions about immigration or need a lawyer, we're here for you. So don't hesitate to contact us. And then don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all of that, so that you don't miss another notable approval or another one of our lives. Thank you all for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with another notable approval. Have a great night and stay safe.